Most people assume the Albanian pyramid schemes of the 1990s collapsed because of basic Ponzi math. The forensic record shows what actually broke them was something else. For almost 3 years, from 1992 to the end of 1995, these companies were not pyramid schemes at all. They were smuggling banks. Real cash, real cargo, real revenue. The documented figure is roughly 12% of Albania's entire economy, drawn from one shadow trade. And then, on one specific day in December 1995, something happened 1,000 kilometers away, in Dayton, Ohio, that severed their cash pipeline overnight. 2/3 of a country had 14 months left, half the national economy, gone. So here's the question to hold in your head as we walk through this. What happened on that specific day in Dayton, and why did it turn the most visible, state-endorsed companies in Albania into mathematical time bombs the very next morning? If you were Albanian in 1992, you had just walked out of 40 years of the most isolated communist state in Europe. Your country had no private property until you were a teenager. Your country had no banks that took your deposits and paid you a real return. Your country had nothing you would today recognize as a financial system. You were not stupid, you were new. By 1992, real GDP had collapsed by around 40% from its pre-transition peak. The formal banking sector that emerged from that wreckage was almost a joke. The forensic record shows 3 state-owned banks held roughly 90% of all formal deposits. Their non-performing loan ratio was 27% by 1996. They offered negative real interest rates, meaning inflation ate your savings faster than the bank paid you. An interbank transfer could take up to 15 days to clear. Imagine trying to run a small business through that. You couldn't. And into that vacuum stepped a set of companies with names most people outside Albania have never heard. VEFA Holdings, Gjallica, Xhaferri, Populi, Kamberi, Silva, Senaj, Sudja. About 25 of them in total. They registered as trading companies and charitable foundations, not banks, which meant the Bank of Albania could not regulate them, which, as it turned out, was the entire business plan. The largest of them, VEFA, was founded in October 1992 by a former army sergeant. Within a few years, he had been appointed Albania's representative to NATO's North Atlantic Assembly. That is the kind of story this is. Here is the part that gets missed in most retellings. Between 1992 and 1995, these companies were not mathematically impossible. They had a real cash engine. The forensic record shows that during those years, the United Nations had placed an arms and oil embargo on the former Yugoslavia, which was at war with itself next door. Albanian firms, with the quiet tolerance of the Albanian state, became the main corridor for contraband running into that embargoed market. Fuel, weapons, goods of every description. According to Christopher Jarvis in his 1999 working paper for the International Monetary Fund, the shadow trade tax revenue alone was running at around 12% of Albanian GDP. The revenue was genuine. The profits were genuine. So when VEFA or Gjallica paid a depositor 6, 7, 8% a month, they could actually cover it, for a while, out of smuggling cash. This is why the Albanian public trusted them. This is why almost 2/3 of the entire country put money in. And then, in December 1995, in a United States Air Force base in Dayton, Ohio, the leaders of Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia signed a peace accord. The Yugoslav wars were over. The embargo was lifted. And the cash engine that had been funding the Albanian investment companies was switched off overnight. Peace broke out. The firms did not announce this. They could not. What they did instead, and this is where the math begins to fail, was raise their interest rates. By mid-1996, monthly rates were climbing from the original 4 to 6%, up through 10, into the 20s. By November, the smallest scheme, Sudja, was promising to double your principal in 2 months. Xhaferri was promising to triple it in 3. These are rates no real business can pay. Not for a week, not for an hour. They could only be paid by taking new money from new depositors to pay old ones. That is the definition of a Ponzi. The International Monetary Fund noticed. According to Jarvis's IMF paper, in August 1996, IMF staff issued a formal warning to the Albanian government. In October, IMF management issued a second, stronger one. The World Bank was issuing parallel warnings in the same period. President Salih Berisha's government responded by endorsing the schemes. According to Fred Abrahams in Modern Albania, published by NYU Press in 2015, Berisha declared on state television that Albanian money was the cleanest in the world. His Minister of Finance drew a public distinction between pure pyramid schemes and companies with real investments, implying that the hybrid firms were safe. A parliamentary investigation committee was announced. It was never convened. It never audited anything. It never issued a report. The warnings kept arriving. The rates kept climbing. And around kitchen tables all across Albania, families kept handing over everything they had. And this is the part that still surprises me when I read the original IMF correspondence. The warnings were not buried. They were on paper. They were unambiguous. The government read them and chose. The default, when it came, did not come from the biggest firm. It came from the smallest. On November 19, 1996, a company called Sudja stopped paying out. According to Smokey Musaraj's ethnographic fieldwork, published as Tales from Alvarado by Cornell University Press in 2020, Sudja was run by a former shoe factory worker who, in contemporary Tirana reports, also worked as a fortune teller. Her scheme was a pure pyramid, no real business, no real assets, just mathematics stacked against time. When the payouts stopped, a crowd gathered outside her apartment in Tirana. She stepped onto her balcony with a megaphone. What she said into that megaphone is one of the most remarkable public statements of the decade. "My game is over. It was a pyramid game. My company is bankrupt." And then she told the crowd not to ask for their money back. In most retellings, this moment is treated as a curiosity. What it actually was the first confirmed signal that the entire structure was mathematically broken. The larger firms noticed immediately. VEFA, Camberi, Silva, and Sinaj jointly announced an interest rate cut, down to around 5% monthly, to try to slow the outflows. It did not work. Because once depositors realized the smallest scheme had lied, they stopped believing any of the rest. The runs began. In January 1997, Sudja and Gjallica formally declared bankruptcy. The government froze roughly $250 million in the accounts of Xhaferri and Populi, about 10% of Albania's annual GDP, held in two so-called charitable foundations. In late January and early February, the auditors arrived. Price Waterhouse and Deloitte went through VEFA's books. What they found? Liabilities of around $250 million against assets generously valued at $30 million. Gjallica was worse. $343 million in liabilities, $3 million in recoverable assets, 82,000 depositors. The money that Albanians thought they had was not coming back. About half of the entire national economy had just evaporated. And that is when the math had stopped working. In Vlora, on the coast, the city where the schemes were born, the crowds were already forming in the streets. Here is what I find hardest about this story. The Albanians who lost everything were not financially unsophisticated. They were not, for the most part, reckless gamblers. They were farmers, teachers, police officers, returning migrant workers. They were people whose state banks paid them negative interest and took 15 days to move money. They were people whose president had told them on state television that their money was the cleanest in the world. And so they did what, in that context, looked rational. They sold what they had. In a village called Narta, near Vlora, a woman had spent 4 years working in Greece. She pooled around 8 million lek, roughly $80,000, of her extended family's remittances. According to Musaraj's fieldwork, she put it first into Gjallica. When that payout came through, she rolled all of it into VEFA, chasing a 10 million lek threshold that unlocked a higher monthly tier. And while she waited for the payout, she demolished her family's existing house. Not because she had to, because she expected to rebuild on the same plot, something bigger. The payout never came. VEFA suspended withdrawals in early 1997. Her husband remigrated to Greece. By 2012, she was running a small shop in Tirana. The house stayed demolished. Her case is not unusual, it is representative. A 15-year-old boy from a southern village worked undocumented on Greek construction sites through 1996. Every wage went home to his father. His father put all of it into VEFA. All of it was gone. A man in Tirana sold his own house, convinced his sister to sell hers, and pooled both into the schemes at mid-1996. He learned the schemes had collapsed at a dinner party. He fled to Germany afterward to work off the debt he owed his sister. A university security guard explained, on record in Musaraj's archive, that his family had stopped eating their own chicken's eggs. They were selling them to fund more deposits. A woman in Tirana who had sold her $13,000 home to invest and now faced eviction told a television camera, and I am paraphrasing because the audio is hard to hear, that if this was what democracy meant, she did not like it, and the only reason she was still alive was because she could not kill herself. These decisions in 1996 are worth understanding as history, not as financial advice, but as a window into how people actually behaved when the systems they trusted stopped working. And then, in February 1997, Albania stopped being about money. On February 9th, in Vlora, the port city where Gjallica had been headquartered, a policeman shot and killed a protester. The funeral turned into an insurrection. The riots spread north. Cities rose one after another. On the 1st of March, Prime Minister Alexander Meksi's government resigned. The day after, Berisha was re-elected by parliament and declared a state of emergency. Within 2 weeks, the Albanian military had begun to desert in large numbers. The soldiers had invested in the schemes too, and when they walked away, they left the armories behind. According to Miranda Vickers and James Pettifer's Albania, From Anarchy to a Balkan Identity, in under 1 week, Albanian civilians walked into those depots and took out roughly 600,000 firearms, 3.5 million hand grenades, about 3,600 tons of military explosives. The documented figure for the death toll over the following months ranges, depending on the source, from around 1,600 to 2,000. Most of them were not political combat. They were gang shootouts, accidental detonations of looted ordnance. I have read the Vickers and Pettifer account 3 times. The thing that does not leave is how quickly it happened. 8 weeks. 8 weeks between the auditors walking into VEFA and civilians walking into army depots. Albanians had started the year believing they were going to become wealthy. They ended it armed, bereaved, and approximately half as rich as they had been, on paper. The autopsy on Albania's pyramid schemes begins with one fact. The financial collapse and the social collapse were not the same event. They were 60 days apart. The forensic record shows the financial collapse. The moment about half the national economy stopped being recoverable was already complete by mid-February 1997. The auditors' numbers were in. The bankruptcies were filed. The runs had finished. The social collapse, the armory looting, the desertions, the dead, came after. That gap matters. It tells you the story is not really about money disappearing. It is about what disappeared with the money. Trust in a state. Belief in a presidency. The thin layer of legitimacy that sat between depositor and government and held the country together. So who, inside this story, did not lose everything? Who, inside this story, did not lose everything? According to Musaraj's oral history archive, there is a documented Albanian migrant who left for Italy before the mania peaked. He kept his earnings inside the Italian labor market. He did not remit them home. His relatives, waiting for his wages, were disappointed. When the schemes collapsed, he lost nothing. His survival was not cleverness, it was distance. A second documented case, also in Musaraj's fieldwork, is a middle-class couple who ran a photography studio in the southern city of Gjirokastër. They had invested about $5,000. That capital was gone. When the southern cities erupted, they lined the interior walls of their home with thick books to act as improvised armor. The husband took a rifle that had come out of one of the looted armories and stood watch over the studio at night. They lost the investment. They did not lose their home. They did not lose their business. They did not lose each other. And then there is the third group, the one the historical record is most uncomfortable about. According to Jarvis's IMF paper and confirmed in Vickers and Pettifer, an unknown number of Albanians, possibly hundreds, participated in the schemes knowing full well that they were fraudulent. They watched for the moment middle-class professionals started pouring money in, the classic signal of a terminal phase, and they extracted their principal before the liquidity crisis hit. Many reportedly used that extracted cash to buy real estate at desperate prices from people who had liquidated their own homes to stay in the scheme. Morally, this is ugly. As a matter of historical record, it is what happened. If you look across all the documented cases, a pattern does emerge. The financial survivors were almost all people whose wealth was not inside the Albanian domestic system. Either they kept it abroad, or they held tangible assets outside the schemes, or they treated the schemes as a hostile game. Every documented case where someone liquidated a home or livestock or eggs to chase interest rates inside the schemes ended in total loss. Every one. Albania did not stay broken. In April 1997, the United Nations Security Council authorized an Italian-led multinational force of about 7,000 troops, Operation Alba. It was enough to stabilize the country long enough for an election. In July, Sali Berisha resigned the presidency. The Albanian government, notably, did not bail out the depositors. The cost to taxpayers of the collapse was, on paper, zero. The actual cost, the homes sold, the livestock liquidated, the diaspora wages erased, the lives lost, fell entirely on the families themselves. What the survivors did was not what most retellings expect. They did not, mostly, organize. They did not, mostly, recover their money. Albanian courts traced only a fraction of the missing capital, and a portion of it quietly moved abroad into Italian financial networks and offshore accounts in places the Albanian courts could not reach. That missing capital is still the biggest open question about this event. What the survivors did instead was leave. According to Eurostat migration data, between 1997 and 2010, roughly 1 in 4 working-age Albanians emigrated. They worked in Italian kitchens and Greek construction sites and London cleaning shifts. They sent money home, but this time to family, not to schemes. The remittances rebuilt the country the schemes had hollowed out. And this is the part that, when I read the diaspora numbers, still stops me. The same population that had been told its money was the cleanest in the world spent the next 20 years cleaning other people's kitchens to make that money real. If you are looking for the modern mirror, the forensic record is not subtle. According to the Federal Trade Commission's 2023 Consumer Sentinel report, Americans alone reported $10.2 billion in fraud losses, with investment scams the largest single category at $4.6 billion. According to Chainalysis's 2024 Crypto Crime Report, pyramid schemes and Ponzi structures dressed in cryptocurrency drew an estimated $4.6 billion in 2022 alone. The Asian Development Bank, in its 2023 Pacific Economic Monitor, documented active pyramid scheme outbreaks in 3 Pacific Island states, with formal banking gaps similar to 1992 Albania. The structure has not disappeared, it has just changed clothes. So here is the question I want to leave you with after all of this. If you had been standing in Narta in the autumn of 1996, watching your neighbors grow rich on paper, watching a woman you knew take apart her own house to rebuild it bigger, what do you think you would have done? Tell me in the comments. Be honest with yourself. That honesty is the only inheritance this story actually leaves us.